Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. We have now become the textbook example of a failed state the world over. A laughingstock. After 45 years of independence, we are failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections so we can have a government that is accountable to the people, that is competent to run the nation's affairs. Why? Why are we in this sorry state? I'll be the first one to admit that the blame has got to be put on Zanu PF. This is a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime that, from the word go when the country gained its independence in 1980, had no intention of establishing a competent government. All they wanted is power, absolute power. And the regime has never hesitated to do whatever it takes to stay in power, including rigging elections, harassing and beating up people and his opponents, and even killing them. Somebody once said that Zanu PF would rather burn down the whole country than to let anybody else rule the country. That is the level of Zanu PF's commitment to power. But after 45 years of independence, we cannot deny that the country did have many opportunities to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. Of course we did. The best chance was during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. SADC, the regional body, had forced Robert Mugabe and his Zanu PF friends to sign the global political agreement which gave birth to the GNU. And the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. So why did the opposition fail to implement even one reform? Simple. Mugabe bribed Tsvangirai and his eMDC friends with the trappings of high office. The E-Class Mercedes Benz for the MP, the Prime Minister Tsvangirai himself and his two deputies, and the ministers, the eMDC ministers and deputy ministers, the generous salaries for all the elected eMDC officials and allowances, and for Tsvangirai himself, an E-Class, a $4 million mansion in islands, etc., etc. And with the eMDC leaders, with their snouts in the feeding trough, they forgot about the reforms. This has been at the heart of why the opposition have failed to implement even one token reform in the 25 years they've been on the political stage, including the 5 years in the GNU. We can talk about everything else, but that is the elephant in the room. We're wasting time talking about everything else. What is worse, the opposition has been participating in these flawed elections out of greed. It really is annoying the way the opposition has continued to talk about everything else except the elephant in the room. Here is one of the opposition leader herself. She did participate in the 2018 elections and the 2023 elections with a view of trying to win some of those few golden gravy train seats. This is a quotation from David Coulthard's book, admitting that the election process in Zimbabwe are flawed and illegal, and the only logical step to do is to withdraw. But they would not withdraw. Here is Fazama Here in a recent interview with one of Zimbabwe's independent journalists, Trevor Nuve.
Endorsed him, I've never believed. Failed so spectacularly as soon as he did, but I never endorsed because, like I said, Zanu PF is rotten to the core. The model can never take us into the future. And I think the mistake that we made as citizens is twofold. The first being that we thought that if the symbol of our oppression, Robert Mugabe, fell, then that would be the end of our problems. We underestimated just how large the system that's been created over time and perfected by Zanu PF was. The second mistake is we should have, and this is a regret, and this, I strongly regret, we allowed there to be infractions of the Constitution because of the sense of populism, the Constitution during that time. We made a huge mistake. Yeah. You cannot use sanctions as a scapegoat for failure. So you cannot say that we're in this crisis because of sanctions.
Well, there's no need to listen to the rest of it.
Now imagine if that...
The rest of it, she's just wittering one about sanctions. The point here is, by the time Robert Mugabe was removed in 2017, the damage had already been done. The damage was the failure to implement the reforms when you had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU, and then participating in flawed elections when you know the process is flawed, illegal, and the only logical step to do is to withdraw. eMDC leaders participated in 2013. And she participated in 2018 and then in 2023, knowing fully well, as David Coulthard admitted in his book, that by participating, you are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. I think one of the tragedies with Zimbabwe is that even those who should, by all accounts, understand what is going on here, our journalists, our independent press media, should have seen what is going on here, and that the opposition, our eMDC, CCC opposition, are team Zanu PF team B in all but name. And yet they've never taken them to task. eMDC leaders, ever since the GNU debacle, have been telling their followers that they don't need to implement reforms anymore because they've devised ways of winning rigged elections. And so from 2013, the country has been dragged into meaningless election on the basis that the opposition will win big because they've got winning in rigged election strategies, wires for short. Why our independent media have failed to take the opposition leaders to task on such a blatant lie beggars belief. Chamisa lied to the electorate in 2023 that he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. Chamisa CCC would win big. Of course, the independent practitioners, media practitioners, knew that was a lie. They did nothing. They said nothing about it. Here is a clip from BBC taking Chamisa to task on his repeated lies.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye vakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza naye vakomana.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election,
but
$15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
It's amazing that the BBC was able to pick him up on one issue. And yet, after 25 years of the opposition being on the political stage, I can rarely remember any occasion when Zimbabwe's own independent media, forget about the Zanu PF controlled ZBC. Of course, they would not want to take the opposition to task. After all, by being corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless, and playing their key role of being Zanu PF Team B in all but name, that suits the regime. So ZBC will never, of course, take them to task on that. But why as the independent media failed to do so. Here is one interview where Margaret Longo took our corrupt and incompetent and utterly useless opposition to task. Listen to this.
And I'm like a social worker. You know, politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business, seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to rule alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
Let inspiration find you.
But they went anyway?
But they went. They realized that, you know, you heard them complain, I used my own money to be in parliament. But what about me who have voted for you? I used my own money. So the idea is to recover. Is it a business where you want to recover your losses? Is it a business? Politics, is it a business where everyone else, when you get in parliament, you want to recover your losses? A good example is now, parliamentarians have been elected. I don't know when we last saw our member of parliament in this area.
She is saying something that is so fundamental, and yet has eluded most of our own ordinary voters, and more particularly our media practitioners, who are supposed to play the key role of educating the electorate. The opposition participated in the 2023 elections as they participated in elections in the past out of greed. That must be understood and should be beyond debating by now. Our friend here, Anyerere, like I said, she participated in the 2018 elections, knowing fully well that that process was flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, she would be giving Zanu PF legitimacy. She still nonetheless went ahead and participated. Because she was after her share of the gravy train seats. In 2023, just before the elections. She was invited to the UN for some conference or something. And instead of speaking out on the need for Zimbabwe to implement reforms so that we could have free, fair, and credible elections, she came out with all guns blazing, telling the world that the fact that Zanu PF has failed to implement any meaningful reforms, that it has failed to produce a verifiable voters' roll, is a sign that Zanu PF is scared and CCC is going to win the 2023 elections. She was hell-bent on participating in those flawed elections, telling the people that CCC would win big. She knew that was a lie. She participated, and she was one of the few CCC leaders who won a seat. And she was one of those whom Margaret Long was talking about there. That when they were asked, why did you participate? Why did you go on even after SADC and the AU election observers and denounce those election processes as flawed? Why did you go on to still take up your seat? She did take up her seat. And they argued that I spent my own money in the campaign. And therefore, then she was going into parliament out of greed. She could not resist the trappings of power of the gravy train. Some people have said, oh no, but she resigned, and which shows that she is she is one of the clean opposition. That's just nonsense. The damage of giving Zanu PF political legitimacy was done by participating in the flawed elections and accepting the seats even after SADC and the AU had condemned the process. She only resigned because Tsvangirai had started to recall some of the elected CCC leaders. She wasn't recalled in the first phase, but I think she feared that she would be recalled sooner than later. Her closeness to Chamisa meant she could never claim to be faithful to Tsvangirai. And by the time she resigned and the recalls started, the damage had already been done. And yet here we are. She's giving an interview, already campaigning for the next elections. Chamisa and company will participate in the next elections, even if there is not even a token reform implemented. For the same reason they participated in 2023, 2018, 2013, and so forth. Greed. We cannot pretend that we failed to stop Zanu PF rigging elections without also acknowledging that those who have been entrusted with that task, they've sold out. MDC CCC leaders as Zanu PF team B in all but name. And I am disappointed that are our so-called private media have connived in this deceit. Because if they were not conniving, they would have taken these MDC CCC sellouts to task. For 25 years, not even one token reform implemented. How can we honestly, in all honesty, say we still have a competent opposition that is committed to delivering the democratic changes that the country so desperately needs? Every nation gets a government that they deserve. In Zimbabwe, we have got to accept that we have got the Zanu PF corrupt, incompetent, vote rigging, tyrannical regime, complete with its equally corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless MDC CCC opposition sidekick. That is the reality. If we want meaningful change in Zimbabwe, that is our starting point. We need a competent opposition if we are ever going to stop this Zanu PF juggernaut. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.